let me just skip to it. If there was one thing you wish voters knew going into the 2026 election, what would be that one thing?
So farm boy, I'm going to work just as hard as they do every day. And they deserve to have a governor that works just as hard as they do. And unfortunately, we don't have that governor right now. And I'm going to work hard every day to make sure Michigan's more affordable, that our job creators can invest and grow here in the state, and most important, that our kids receive a quality education where they can read, write, and actually earn a living after they finish.
Welcome to the show. Today we have Senator Aric Nesbitt. He is running for Michigan governor, and I'm on a mission to interview every single candidate running for governor because I have just seen the decline of my state. I'm born and raised in Michigan, and I want Michigan to do well. And if I can do something to help, I'm going to. And so I'm going to use my platform to inform the voters of their choices. A lot of people kind of feel like the race is already done, like they're already like predicting who's going to win, but we haven't even gone through primary elections yet. So let's take one step at a time. We have months until election season comes. So let's just take our time and get to know all the candidates. So thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to your viewers straight and to you on some of the challenges that Michigan's seeing, because I'm running for governor because I want to make sure everybody can make it here in Michigan again. Mm-hmm. Right now, you see that it's tough for our families to make it in Michigan with the high cost of living. It's tough for our job creators to invest and grow here in Michigan because the regulatory burdens coming out of Lansing. And most importantly, it's tough for our kids to make it here in Michigan. And we're a bottom 10 state in education. That's why I'm running for governor, is to make sure that everybody can make it here in Michigan.
I love it. So first, I want to just talk about your background. So when did you join politics and what did you do with your life before?
Yeah. Well, so as I said, governor, because I want everybody to make it here in Michigan. And it's tough right now. I grew up in Southwest Michigan. I grew up on a small family farm. Family's been in Michigan for 200 years. I grew up on a 6th-generation dairy and grape farm where you learn those values of hard work, community, patriotism, family. And that's where Aric with an A comes from, a little different spelling. Middle of 5 kids, all started with A's. And by the time Mom got to me, it was either going to be Aric or Erica with an A. And boy, I'm glad she went with Aric. I know I would have grown up a little tougher if it was Erica. But grew up on a small farm, 6 generations in the same township. And we didn't have air conditioning growing up. So a long day of baling hay. 90-degree weather with 90% humidity, and you get home. We slept on the couch on the main floor. It was just a few degrees cooler than upstairs in the room. Graduated from the same public school my dad and grandfather and brothers graduated from. My sisters were homeschooled. I was homeschooled for a few years also. But I went on to Hillsdale College, did my degree in economics from Hillsdale. And one of those things at Hillsdale, very independent school, very free market, but it's a reminder that those basic common sense lessons I learned on the farm of individualism, of hard work, of freedom, you learn the policies, the foundations of America, why America really is the last best hope of mankind. We're a young country with the oldest constitution in the world. We believe in the individual instead of the state.
It's interesting because a lot of people, and I do this too, a lot of people compare the United States to other countries. My family's from Italy, so I always compare us to Italy. But there's a reason my family came here. You could say like universal healthcare and stuff in Italy, but it's a very poor country. So that's why people come to the United States for freedom. They do not have free speech in Europe. We do. So people come to America for freedom, for work, for prosperity.
And that's a reminder as we celebrate 250 years as a country next year. We're a young country with the oldest constitution in the world. And as I go around the state, you meet a lot of different people of why they came to America, why it's a magnet for people, is because of that opportunity. And how do you pass that opportunity along to that next generation to make them succeed? And I'd say my story, is unlike, not unlike a lot of others, farm boy, making the fight, got married My wife, Tricia, we have 3 wonderful kids. Catherine's 6 years old. She's in first grade. Just great smile, great energy. We have a 3.5-year-old son, William. He's our Sour Patch Kid. He's a terror at home, like a boy should be. And then you drop him off at daycare, and the teacher goes, "Man, that William's such a sweetheart." And then Margot Louise is 8 months old, and she was born in April, and 2 weeks early, but still came out 9 pounds 14 ounces. Wow. So God bless my wife. And that's really, the story starts on why I'm running for governor, is that 5 years ago during the COVID lockdowns, it was the second set. I was driving my wife to the OB's office, and I couldn't go go in with her into the OB's office because of Governor Whitmer and the Democrat lockdowns. And I had to stay out in the car. And I get a text from my wife saying we lost our second kid to a miscarriage.
Wow.
The worst thing that could happen to a parent, losing a child. And I could not be next to my wife, holding her hands, because of what Governor Whitmer and the Democrats did in Lansing by shutting down our access. And that my story is not unlike a lot of other folks around the state. Yeah. And it's tough to make it in Michigan. I mean, our cost of living is high compared to other states. So it's tough for our families to make it here. Our job creators, these small businesses, are trying to invest and grow jobs here, and it's tough for them to make it here because of the bureaucratic red tape in Lansing. And then we open up talking about our kids. I mean, just because of the COVID lockdown, the average kid in school is behind 3/4 of a grade level, just because of the COVID lockdowns. That doesn't include the fact that they're learning DEI before the ABCs, if at all, in this woke, agenda that's going into schools is wrong. And so you got to trust parents with choice in education. We got to make sure every kid is able to read at the 3rd grade level, because we know when you're not able to read at the 3rd grade level, by the end of 3rd grade, you have a 2 out of 3 chance of doing one of 2 things in your life: either going to jail at some point or being on social welfare. When 3 out of 5 of our kids can't do that, that paints a very poor picture for the future of our state. And I'm running because I want to paint a very different picture for Michigan, one that's actually has opportunity and success, one where our families can have lower cost of government, lower property taxes, lower income taxes, lower cost of insurance and energy, one where businesses, as I talk to business owners, they're trying to invest and grow into Michigan, and the layers of government in Michigan prevents them from investing and growing. I was talking it was actually a boat manufacturer in the west part of the state, and they're trying to replace their docks that they allow boats to go out. And 4th generation family business, 700 employees. So this is 700 families that depend on this manufacturer, right? Yeah. And they're 4 years in, and $1.5 million of legal and engineering costs just to replace their dock, going from a fixed dock to a floating dock. Really, the environmental regulators are spending their time on that instead of making sure PFAS is cleaned up, making sure that some of these folks are held accountable. Priorities are wrong. Yeah. And then you look at education beyond choice, beyond 3rd grade reading, is that over the last 30 years, that we've had folks from DC and Lansing, these bureaucrats, saying everybody has to go into college, right?
Yep.
No exceptions. Everybody's got to go into college.
I've talked about that so much. I mean, I remember as early as 5th grade, I was asked where I'm going to go to college. And it's like, can we just let kids be kids and,
let girls be girls and let boys be boys too, while we're at it.
Just let them explore things, teach them the basics, reading, math, science, and they will figure it out as they go. So I called it my quarter life crisis, because I got out of college because I'm like, okay, I've always been told you need to do this, you need to do this. So I get out of college and I'm like, I did everything they told me to do. And then there was no work here.
Yeah. What year was that?
I graduated college 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went and got my master's degree because that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And that didn't work out either. I mean, I'm thankful for the experiences because you really get drilled into you how to do research properly. And so I use that in my daily work when I do investigative work and stuff. But I could have learned it without spending, I think I'm at like $60,000 in student loans. So could have done it without that. And now I work for myself, so I didn't need any degree.
I was talking to a kid in our town. I think he's about 23 right now. And he, it was the same thing, right? In, high school, you got to go into college. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. You just go on to college, right? Did a few semesters, got $30,000 of loans, decided, you know what, I'll be a med tech, which doesn't need college. You just need some additional training, right? Mm-hmm. Did that. He has a fine job right now, but he has that $30,000 of college loans that he's having to pay back. How are you supposed to get your first house? How are you supposed to get a car, transportation, right? Mm-hmm. And you've seen over the last 45 years, 50 years, I think with the growth of the Federal Department of Education, all that it's done is grow the amount of college debt. Our scores continue to go down. And there's more regulations and rules coming out of D.C. instead of flexibility for parents in our local districts and trusting folks who actually know our kids the best. And you see that here in Michigan over the last 10 years. Our student population has gone down. Number of teachers has gone down, but the number of administrators and their pay have skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. That's not solving the education crisis that we have here in Michigan.
So, I mean, as you've said, our education is terrible. We're 44th in reading in the nation. I mean, it's terrible.
48th in science and bottom 10 in overall.
Yeah, it's bad. So the government thinks if we just throw money at something, it's going to fix the problem. So that's where, you see the announcements every year. Whitmer is like, we have more money for education. It's so great. And yet things keep getting worse. So what are your thoughts? Like, what do you actually want to do to improve education in the state?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You have to have accountability. You have to empower parents with choice. And you have to really get back to basics, making sure our kids are able to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and have that basic level to be able to succeed. And the beauty of our federalist system here in America is that you can compare and look at other states. Mm-hmm. In Michigan, we outspend a lot of other states. But the challenge in Michigan is we used to be a wealthy state, so we could afford it. We're a welfare state now. Mm-hmm. We got to become a wealthy state again if we're going to win and compete in the 21st century. So that means lowering the cost for families. That means making it more competitive for small business owners to invest and entrepreneurs to create jobs here in Michigan so they can make it here. But you're right. Most importantly is how do we make sure our kids, our most precious resource, are able to make it here in Michigan. And I look at it a few ways. One is that on day one, when I'm governor, is that I'm going to sign us into what President Trump got passed earlier this year on providing scholarships for everybody to be able to go to the school that they wish to go to. Providing choice and competition, that's a unique American way that I think has shown, that I know has shown around America that that's the best way to do it. Two is accountability, making sure that you look at other states. 10 years ago, Mississippi was 49th in reading scores, and the joke in the South was like, well, at least Mississippi's behind us, right? If you're Alabama or Arkansas or whatever. But 10 years ago, Mississippi, the leadership there, the state superintendent, I just talked to the former state superintendent of Mississippi last month. We had a nice conversation. Got together. It's like, instead of this 200-page consultant blather of saying, we're going to do these 200 items for our schools, we got around and said, you know what? By the end of third grade, every kid's going to be able to learn, be able to read. That is so important, so foundational. And so they got to the phonics-based science of reading, making sure that curriculum is in the schools. 2, making sure that there's literacy coaches for our teachers on how to teach it. Mm-hmm. And 3, if you're not at that level by third grade, that intensive tutoring is offered for those students.
Yeah, because what we've seen the past few years is kids just get moved on. Doesn't matter if they're failing, they just move on to the next grade. There's no help.
And there was a recent Boston University study that showed, and I know nobody likes having to hold back a kid. I get that. I have 3 young kids. I hope they're never held back, right? But there was a study, it was Boston University issued it earlier this year, that said actually those kids that were held back because of that accountability measure were further ahead than the kids that weren't by 6th grade.
I mean, because it's tough if you're behind and they're teaching you new things and you still don't know the basics from the previous year, then you just keep getting further and further behind.
But our Michigan's 44th out of 50.
Yeah.
And then going into the trades, there's great family supporting jobs out there in the trades. And as President Trump's working to rebuild our manufacturing base, our infrastructure, trying to get more investment here in the United States of America, then unfortunately a lot of that investment's not happening here in Michigan. And we've lost a half a generation of blue collar workers, of tradesmen, because 30 years ago everybody started saying everybody's got to go into college. And you talked about the albatross of the college debt. And what am I supposed to do then? I look at my brother, 35 years ago, my oldest brother, and I don't know if he likes me saying this or not, but he was one of those C average students, right? But boy, he could tear apart a transmission on the weekend, put it all back together, and not have a bucket of bolts left over. That's the important part, not having the bucket of bolts left over. And if you would have required him, like is required today, to take 2 years of a foreign language and Algebra 2, and as long as you get a D on it, you're going to get a diploma. Who cares what your actual understanding of reading, writing, and arithmetic is? As long as you pass that class with better than an F, you're good. Well, my brother, they didn't have those requirements in the early 90s. He spent his junior year at the local career center doing diesel mechanics. He spent his senior year doing work co-op. And he had a job on day one at a farm implement dealership, a good family supporting job, and he's been fine. And now folks are saying, you got to pay off somebody else's college debt? He gets really offended by that. But I look at it as that I think a lot of folks over the last few years, especially with COVID, I think there's been an unmasking on what is the role of government, what is the role of education, how responsible are we to trust the individual instead of the state on a lot of this stuff. Micro, you guys know Micro. Dirty Jobs. He has a TV show, and he was speaking in Dearborn a few months ago, and he said for every 5 people retiring from the trades right now, there's only 2 people replacing them.
Yeah.
And if you're going to lower the cost of housing and actually have construction workers and plumbers and electricians, if you're going to build out manufacturing, if you're going to rebuild infrastructure, you got to have these family supporting jobs. These are blue collar jobs that pay well, have good benefits, can't be exported. I don't think AI is going to be able to take them over either.
No, I don't think AI is everything it's making out to be. Maybe we'll talk about that.
Might not be Skynet from Terminator, but I also might not be the Jetsons either. But I do think there's some enhancements on productivity that can happen there.
Yeah. Now, I'll just say it. So do you have any plans to keep schools safe? Because right now, the left says gun control, take away everyone's guns. And then the right doesn't have any plan.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? I mean, this is a huge problem in Michigan. We see these attacks all the time. It's a problem across the country. So what are we going to do here?
Yeah, 3 young kids, I get it. As a gun owner myself, I get it. Somebody who grew up on a farm and went to public school, and you never really heard about that growing up when I did. And I'd have a hunting rifle in the back of our car in high school, and because we'd go out goose hunting afterwards or deer hunting, depending on what my buddies and I were doing. There's a responsibility that's there. And I think it's false to say that the Republicans don't have a plan. I think that's a media-driven narrative on saying, because you have a lot of them that say that we need to make sure we have reserve officers in our schools that are actually on the boots, on the grounds, and we know that it has to take on these folks. If teachers want to arm themselves, I think that's an option where teachers should have that ability to do that. I know some folks on the left like, oh my goodness, how dare that happen? But I think there's that, you got to trust individuals, law-abiding people to do the right things. And And you're right. You don't want our kids to grow up with fear. You want kids to be kids. And so there are things where you can make sure that we finance some of these things on security systems in schools and video cameras, making sure there's that equality in all the schools here in Michigan instead of just some of them, making sure that there's the right mental health resources for folks and that there's a way to report them. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that we don't have these woke prosecutors that won't go after folks for lower level crimes like what we saw with the MSU shooter. That was a prosecutor time after time after time. They could have slammed the book at him, and they didn't slam the book at him.
And we saw this in Traverse City as well, with the stabbing that occurred. The guy had a huge record. A judge let him out. He was literally let go because they thought he was insane. So, the best thing was just to put him on the street. So there's a lot of things that are preventable, and mental health. As you see school shootings, mass shootings go up, you also see mental health decline. When people talk about gun control.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit more?
So, it's more so that mental health is the problem, and that's why mass shootings are happening. A sane person does not walk into a room and shoot children.
I was talking to a sheriff a few weeks ago, and a real sheriff up north. And he goes, we drop him off at the hospital, somebody with a mental health issue, and they beat us back home, being let out. And I think it was a mistake 30 years ago that we closed down all these mental health institutions. Mm-hmm. There are people that need help, mm-hmm. need consistent help, that are a harm to themselves or a harm to others, that are likely state wards for a temporary time or a long time. And these are investments that we need to make both in hospitals so that sheriffs don't have to drive to Indiana for an open behavioral health bed, mm-hmm. that we have those options here. And unfortunately, 30, 40 years ago, whether it was through court orders or through executive actions, that we don't have those options in Michigan, and we're seeing that result. And COVID didn't help at all.
No.
You're a critical worker, but you're not. You can have a job, but you can't. We're going to put a chain on the schoolhouse door, and you can't actually go there. I mean, that's been a huge driver on behavioral health, mental health over the last 5 years. Is just that effect, and that needs to be fixed, saying every person, we value the life of every individual, of every person. And some people have a real issue with behavioral mental health issues that they need long-term help, or there's some that can require group homes that, I think are resourceful. But I think there's a larger need to redo our mental health system here in Michigan.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that, so it's good to hear.
But there's a lot of folks that are out there that are in the system, and it's about those that work in the system instead of the patients that are in there. Now, there's a lot of good nurses, a lot of good doctors, but I do think that the state really needs to step up, and you look at it, it's both to help the patient, but it's also to help the safety of our families. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned Traverse City, it was a good person that was armed that stopped a bad person.
Yeah.
That was armed, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where I was going with that too is just for people who say it's the guns that are causing all the problems. Gun ownership over the past 30 years has actually been in a steady decline. So if mass shootings were because of guns, we would see an incline in gun ownership, but we haven't seen that. But that's where the mental health decline is more correlated with the increase, is just what I was trying to get at.
There's evil in the world too. Mm-hmm. And we just saw that in Australia this last Sunday. And Australia has some of the toughest gun laws in the world. And yet a bad person with a gun couldn't be stopped because there wasn't good people with guns. So
turning the page a little bit. So I'm very big into medical freedom. Most of my audience are very independent minded and willing to hear anyone. They don't like when the government tells them what to do. So recently, Michigan's chief medical expert said that Michigan is going to reject the CDC recommendations when it comes to vaccines and take the advice of the American Academy of Pediatrics. The American Academy of Pediatrics is funded by the vaccine makers, by Pfizer, by Merck. And they're saying, reject CDC. We want every vaccine. And other than in Florida, every state it is required to have your child up to date on their vaccines to go to school. So while there's not like vaccine mandates written into law, there are. And a lot of pediatricians will drop you as a patient if you do not have your child fully vaccinated. Even if you try to delay certain vaccines or spread them apart, a lot of pediatricians will drop you because they have quotas to meet for bonuses. So if you were governor, would you follow CDC guidelines? Would you force vaccination for kids to go to school? What are your thoughts on just medical freedom in general?
I think there's a larger issue that's been out there over the last several decades in the trust with our public institutions. And I think a lot of that broke down under COVID and the mandates where the Governor Whitmer, for example, says, I'm just following the science and data. No, she was following political science and polling data. And looking back 5 years ago, you saw that case after case. I mean, I have a staffer that was in ROTC at a university, was planning on going to the Army, serving his country with distinction, and then he was required to get the COVID vaccine. And he made that decision that I don't think it was tested enough. I don't believe that it's there. And as a young person that's healthy, I'm not as concerned with COVID as if I had comorbidities and was older, right? I mean, I think we've seen that with some of the countries and other states in terms of responses. It's like, and he made that decision and really negatively impacted him financially and what the future was. And I have a great staffer now. And I heard that with a neighbor of mine who was a pharmacist or a pharmatech at a large local hospital, 35 years. You have to make a decision. Are you going to take the jab or not? And then they're wondering why we have a shortage with medical professionals, right? Mm-hmm. Shortage of nurses, shortage of folks working in the hospital. It's like, I didn't become to be the mask police or be, the jab police. Now, fortunately, with President Trump, what we've seen over the last year is that there's a little better flexibility, a little better understanding on like, okay, you have what I would call some traditional vaccines that shown, I think have shown to be helpful. But there's some more recent ones that hasn't gone through the same, and that there needs to be that explanation. I'm going to be trusting. Let's trust individuals to talk to their doctors, to work what's best for their families. And I'm somebody beyond medical freedom. There's a food freedom too. Mm-hmm. I'm a farm boy, small farm. I mean, we had 60 head of dairy.
Do you drink raw milk?
I grew up on raw milk. And there wasn't any warning signs on it, but it's one of those things where going to visit friends, I'm like, what is this? I hate saying dirty dishwater, but what is this skim milk all about? And we would go out. My dad, would go out with a 5-gallon bucket, put it in the bulk tank, and then we'd fill up the gallon jugs. And my mom's skim milk would be this half-gallon jug. It was a Tupperware container that she would skim off the cream at the top because it was non-homogenized, mm-hmm. Non-pasteurized. And my dad would take the cream off for his own cereal, but that was my mom's skim milk as part of it. But we'd make we had a garden. We'd have, we're not Seventh-day Adventists, but there's a large Seventh-day Adventist population. They're usually known for their healthy, crunchy foods. And, growing up, we never had sugar in the house. It was real maple syrup or honey.
Yep.
And those were the sweeteners that we would use on, I guess grape nuts and maple syrup. Real maple syrup actually isn't that bad of a cereal. And
raw milk, it's always so funny to see the outrage over raw milk because in the past 30 years, they say that 3 people have died from raw milk. You don't actually know those individual cases. A lot of times when you see these reported deaths, they were actually on their deathbed with something else. They were already dying, just like how COVID happened. Everyone was labeled a COVID death. So that's kind of how it is with raw milk. People are so, quick to say, people are dying from raw milk. 3 people have died in the past 30 years from raw milk. 3 people have also died in the past 30 years from pasteurized milk. So,
it's a bigger issue on informed, I think, going back to your debate on informed consent with adults. And having adults doing adult things that you and I might disagree with, that's about being an adult. When's the age of reason? But it's how do you make it so that everybody can make those choices and have those informed choices? And whether it's, we were long-term dairy farmers. My dad passed away 5.5 years ago, and big burly guy, long hair, big beard, served 3 tours in Vietnam, came back and farmed for the next 50 years. And then Agent Orange, he had an Agent Orange presumption, and came back and nipped him on the bud 50 plus years later. You just don't know the effect long term.
yeah.
But he's somebody that grew up with raw milk, always had it. We had fruit and vegetables, the pear tree in the back, and we had grapes and everything. But it's something where growing up with it, you see that you have that informed consent to make those decisions. Same with whether you're pickling stuff, pickling or canning fruits and vegetables. I mean, my mom would always can stuff. And this is why I think with things such as cottage food laws that I've always been a good advocate of is that if you want some competition in the marketplace, just tell people that it's not made in a commercial kitchen. It's made in my home kitchen, but you can take it down to the farmer's market and sell it.
Yeah, you should be able to buy food from your neighbor if you want to. And also with that, I'm curious your thoughts. I also think that you should be able to grow food if you want to and raise your own food if you want to, because there's a lot of, it's typically local though. There's local laws that you can only have 4 chickens, or you can only have 1 cow for the first acre and another cow for every additional acre. And it's like, as long as it's not an inhumane situation, you should be able to grow and raise your own food. The government shouldn't be able to tell you what you can do. I even use my front lawn as much as I can to grow food. I have like my jalapeno plants up front and everything.
There's always this, you're right. And there's always this with property rights, this, call it, you go back to Hayek or whatever, constitutional freedom, and saying that how does your own sphere of liberty interfere with other people's sphere of liberty, right? And so my whole point is that as long as you're not affecting your neighbor with noise and traffic and pollution and other things, and you're keeping that within confined in your own private property. Now, when you do, that's where government does intervene.
Yeah.
Enforcement of contracts, making sure that you're not devaluing somebody else's private property. That's why you have that's why you have environmental laws, is that, and so I look at it here in Michigan is that we've gotten way too far on the regulatory stranglehold of having it so tough for new entrepreneurs to invest and grow, current Michigan businesses to invest and grow, and families that want to make it here in Michigan are making it tougher and tougher. I mean, my sister lives in Detroit, and Detroit's a third of the size that it was 70 years ago. There's a lot of open space in Detroit, if you have it. And there's a lot of neighborhoods that just aren't there anymore. Yeah. Or there used to be hundreds and hundreds of houses, and now there's 3. And we're praising it because, the bleed has stopped at 600,000 instead of, the 2 million that it was 70 years ago. But my sister lives in Detroit, and it took her, I think, a 2-year process to get to allow her to have a few goats and some animals in the back of her place, to getting some zoning ordinances change, and that's something where all the neighbors were fine. That they had, I think, 2 or 3 lots, that they had assembled, and they were using that as a little bit of their urban farming. But how do you trust, and this goes back to my point as Americans, is that we got to start first by trusting the individuals, trusting families to make these decisions for them so they can make it here in Michigan, instead of always saying it's about trusting the government that knows best for you. Some people call it a nanny state. That's what parents are for, not the government.
So are you in favor then of parents deciding what vaccines to give their child? Do you think that if a parent decides not to vaccinate their child, or only half the vaccines, whatever, do you think that should reflect on whether or not they should be able to go to public school?
I do think there's some where I think there is an importance of having there in terms of helping out. But I do think that there needs to be discussions between parents and their doctors to find what is best for each of the children, and whether they're immunocompromised or not, whether there's been this surge that we saw with COVID, and I think we can all agree that mandating that is not a good thing. And I think there's been some further questioning over the last 15 years on some of these newer ones. Is it just for pharma, or is it for something that's wider there? And I know I've seen it with my own mom, when I was growing up, even as crunchy as she was, I guess that's the term that you use. So. Yeah. On granola and grape nuts and unpasteurized milk, that she's gone back and forth on some of, on some of this. And so I do think that I do believe when you are going into these areas where in schools, how do you find that balance between people's individual liberties? And I think that's part of the discussion. That's part of the reason why government's there. And let's have those conversations as we go through.
So since you're into farming and everything, you probably know a lot about pesticides. That's another big MAHA topic. Right now, pesticide manufacturers are going state by state lobbying to get full immunity. So there have been billions paid out by pesticide manufacturers in court because people have won. The juries have sided with them that, for example, glyphosate has caused their cancer. So now, instead of creating a safer product or putting a label on the bottle saying that this may cause cancer, they are just simply asking for immunity. Vaccines are the only other product like this. Vaccines in 1986 were given immunity. So if you get injured from a vaccine, you cannot sue the manufacturer. So that's the only product in all 50 states that it's like that. But pesticide companies are trying to get that same immunity now. I believe they have it in 2 states now. Georgia, I want to say Illinois is the other one.
Illinois.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Georgia, I know for sure. Georgia was really bad because there was like a $2 billion settlement or payout. The judge made them pay punitive damages because it was so egregious that it caused this person's cancer. 2 weeks later, they passed the bill to give pesticide manufacturers immunity. So that lawsuit wouldn't be allowed today now in the state. So to me, if you want to poison yourself, go for it. But you shouldn't be allowed to poison your neighbors. Pesticides are a forever chemical. So it gets everywhere. It gets in your soil, gets in our water supply. It's everywhere. So we're all consuming it all the time, whether we consent to it or not. And at the bare minimum, I would think that we should be able to hold these pesticide companies accountable because they know that their products cause cancer and other negative health effects. So what do you think about granting them immunity?
Yeah, I haven't really looked at it much. You gave a very good case on why we have the legal system that we do to make sure that if there's folks that have liability and they're proven in court, that you make sure that there is. And as somebody with a farm background, both on the garden side where it's probably purely organic compared to our traditional agriculture side with corn and soybeans, where we do use our grapes, where we do use herbicides, fungicides, and others. That is something where how do you provide that information to folks? But it is something where I haven't really been approached on that issue,
Really?
but I appreciate
Well, good,
it. Yeah.
good. I'm glad.
Even from neighbors or other dealers, but I haven't been approached on that issue. So
I'm surprised the lobbyists aren't swarming you over this. Tennessee, they hit hard, but they kicked the can down the road. They were going to vote on it next year or something.
But this is a larger point, I think, of why President Trump is such a unique person, nationally, is that he's brought together a lot of these different folks to challenge some of the status quo. Mm-hmm. Not just on the size and scope of government, not just on international affairs, but also on some of these issues. It's like, just because big corporations or big unions or big government says this is the case, that we should question a little bit. I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
But there is still standards of proof of how do you find things on whether it's right or wrong or what's correct or not. And I look at it, my dad, 3 tours in Vietnam, third of 6 kids, grew up on a farm, grew up in the same farmhouse I did, and still doesn't have air conditioning, even though my sister lives in it now. But he was on his deathbed. It was 3 weeks from when we took him to the doctor, and he said having trouble breathing, to finding it was 3 liters of fluid on his lung, and then that looks like that could be cancerous, and then going back to Agent Orange presumption.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a herbicide. Mm-hmm. That was what kind of killed everything, right?
Yeah.
And 3 weeks he was gone, but before he passed away, it was a week before when he could still talk and do some writing. He was looking forward to voting for President Trump again in 2020. And he was one where his first thing was not starting land wars in Asia. That was always his whenever he voted for president, as long as they didn't start land wars in Asia, he was good with them. So he couldn't vote for W back in 2004. and in 20, he's like, must be something with a guy, the big media, big unions, big corporations, big government, all covered by big media, is so opposed to, that he has to have a little better interest at heart. And he may not do it the way I would do it or sell it the way I would sell it. But I look back at somebody who was just, he was a veteran, served the country, probably spit on when he got back home because that was, the era, and then farmed for 50 years, and then that came back and caught him. And that's, I look at it, it's like, it's okay to do a little questioning. It's good to have those conversations. And I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but I do know that I'm going to do my best to make sure that every working family is able to make it here, every job creator and entrepreneur is able to work to invest and grow jobs here in the state, and that our kids are actually able to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic so they can be successful in their own life.
Well, and it goes back to the free market. The free market is great when it's actually regulated properly and it's allowed to be free. So when you give, like with the vaccine, I just have done so much research on this. So when vaccine manufacturers were given immunity, there used to be, I think, 3 vaccines before, and now there's 72 doses of vaccines. So it's just, the market exploded because now they're like, doesn't matter if we injure someone. COVID vaccine, same thing. They got immunity. So all of this just exploded. So with the pesticides, let it be a free market. If their product injures someone should be allowed to sue that company. That's how it works. And the company is at a standstill right now. If they do not want to go out of business, they're going to have to make their product safe, or at the very least put a label warning that their product may cause cancer. But when the government steps in and says, actually, we'll give you immunity, that's not a free market. That goes against the free market. I'm just a huge fan of the free market. Things work out themselves. Let them work out.
And that goes back to believing in the individual instead of the state, that there's that basic belief of free actors in a free economy being able to make it, and how do they interact, enforcement of contracts, and that's where government comes along. And so and there's a lot of other specific issues that you could have those conversations on, and that's where's the line of government, how big or how small, and how do you have those enforcements? And I'm somebody that believes the smaller, more efficient government, the economy can grow faster, and we can be better actors. And the wealthier we are, the more we'll be able to protect the environment.
Mm-hmm. So now let's transition to government transparency, something I'm known for. I hold governments accountable. I'm very big into FOIA, so the Freedom of Information Act. Governor Whitmer said that she would open up the governor's office to be FOIA'd. Michigan is the only state where you cannot FOIA the governor's office, meaning that it's the most corrupt state in my mind out of the union. So would you sign a bill allowing the governor's office to be FOIA'd?
Yes.
Period. And I hope you stick through with that.
It's interesting with this governor. She says all the right public relations stuff. I mean, you see it with the last 7 years, but she's not serious about making sure that whether it's an open, honest government, we saw that during COVID, and not handing over stuff to the legislature. We see that in terms of the regulations that are crushing our businesses and not being able to invest and grow jobs here in Michigan. And yet a year ago, our State of the State says horrible turnaround times on permitting and regulations, right? Well, it's like an arsonist after burning down a house, calling the fire department. And now just this week, she says 2026 is going to be the year of literacy. We've consistently went down 20 plus spots under her administration with having our kids be able to read. And once again, you're seeing where Governor Whitmer has pushed us into a bottom 10 state. And now as she's exiting, she seems to care more about selling books in Nantucket than whether or not our kids can read. And you need a governor that makes that a priority.
It's really interesting. She's an interesting one. Yeah, I could go on all day about Whitmer. I mean, so many people defend her, saying that she's cleaning up a man's job, trying to blame our horrible education on the previous governor. She's been in office for 7 years. Like, she's had time. I mean, think about there's children who started and now are in 7th grade completely under her administration. So there's no excuses at this point. You can maybe say that at the beginning of your term, but you cannot say that 7 years in.
But we were higher in all these rankings 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Between the COVID lockdowns, between repealing accountability measures, such as 3rd grade reading and A through F, so local parents know what their schools are like. And we've seen it, time after time, whether it's Mississippi, whether it's Florida, whether it's Tennessee, that these changes make a difference. It matters. It matters who the governor is. It matters who the executive is.
So right now, what's going on is I am in the middle of my second FOIA lawsuit with my town. because it started over a $25 flash drive, believe it or not. They tried to charge me $50 for 2 flash drives, and I'm like, flash drives don't cost that much. And the Freedom of Information Act only allows them to charge actual cost. So I asked for the receipt of those flash drives, and they didn't want to give it to me. So I FOIA'd the receipt for the flash drives. And then looking at it more, they tried to charge me attorney fees. They never actually gave me a determination letter, whole thing. So now we're like 6 months into this lawsuit.
Yeah, all of this, I think a lot of these laws were made before the internet. Mm-hmm. Before, it was old, file and paper. And there does need to be modernization all over it so that there's that predictability that can happen. But you have to follow, as you look at it, transparency and accountability to the taxpayers over the government. That's just a trust issue.
Yeah.
Basic trust.
And with Grand Blanc right now, they charged me $100,000 for a FOIA. I don't know if you heard in the news, but there's been all of this craziness going on. They put their fire chief on administrative leave weeks after that tragic church shooting. And so I was looking into it, as I do often, and I asked for all the records between the fire chief and the superintendent and the reasons why he was put on administrative leave, and $100,000. Other than that, I FOIA all the time. I FOIA the federal government, the state. I FOIA towns in Georgia and stuff. And the most I've ever been charged before was $1,000, but I was able to work that out where it ended up being free. And so $100,000 for a FOIA, and a transparent government doesn't do that. So what you have to do is you have to appeal to that same board. And of course, they almost always say no. Well, I will say, so Grand Blanc, they made it $50,000. So they did appeal. Oh. So kind of them.
50% savings. So.
Yeah. Something like that should be free, because that brought every news station in the state to their door. And that information, the FOIA says that if it's of public interest, that the clerk can make it free. There's no guarantee of that. But they're just trying to hide that information. But it should be free because it's of public interest. Regardless, now my only option is to sue. And most people, that's how a lot of these towns get you. They just assume that you do not have the resources to be able to go after them like that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. I'm very big on, we need to make FOIA more strict. We need to allow another pathway to be able to appeal these decisions somehow, so you don't just have to pay a lawyer thousands of dollars. And right now, a lot of people say, oh, well, at least you're going to get money after you win. You don't get money in a FOIA lawsuit. You only get your court and attorney fees paid. And if a judge thinks that it's egregious, then they can give you $1,000. But even that, it wouldn't even be $1,000 to me. It would be $1,000 to the state they would have to give too. So it actually costs me money. Even if I win all attorney fees and everything, it still costs me money at the end of the day for all of this time. My first FOIA lawsuit was 1.5 years of my life. And you don't get anything. Like, at the end of the day, you get your records. And there's no punitive damages on the municipality themselves. Usually punitive is over and above your actual costs. So they know, don't do this again. Now with the Open Meetings Act, that one is better, because if an elected official intentionally violates the Open Meetings Act by going in an illegal closed session or not posting a meeting on time, whatever, then they can actually be charged with a misdemeanor. So at least that you have another revenue there with the Open Meetings Act, where you can go criminally or civilly against them. So any thoughts? I'm very big on making it so it's harder for local governments to go in closed sessions. Just this past week, my village attorney said, I can just write Tuesday on a piece of paper and we can go in closed session. Any thoughts?
Yes, this is the importance, whether it's state, local, county government, this is the importance of having efficient, effective, transparent government. What's the role? what's the purpose of government, right? Is it to make people's lives harder or easier? Is it to do what the elected officials or government forces you to do? Or is it about allowing free individuals to do what free individuals do best? And this has been the challenge, I think, at the state level with regulations, with permitting, with licensure, is that we create these regimes, but we don't have a ton of common sense on it. And I think there's a few things that we need to do, as the next governor will, is work to make sure that at the state level, whether it's with permitting that we go through, is the permit needed? If it's not, let's wipe it away. If it is needed, let's make sure that we have set time frames so that taxpayers actually know when they're going to get it. With licensure, is it really that bad that a nurse of 25 years in Ohio has to go through all these hoops to practice in Michigan? Well, we waived it during COVID. Why can't we waive it permanently? I think a plumber down in Ohio that wants to do work, like if we're going to rebuild, we got to make it easier on the licensure side. And a lot of times it's just protecting people within the industry instead of doing what's best for the taxpayers. And the same thing with the financial side, with taxpayer money, is that over the last few years especially, and you've seen it for decades, is like special people with special lobbyists get special grants and special money. Well, what about the taxpayers that are having trouble just making it here, having trouble paying their electric bill, having trouble paying their insurance bills, having trouble paying their property taxes, and they're having to put it on their credit card, and now they're behind on their credit card payments? It's a vicious cycle that's happening. And so that's on the state level, but then county and local governments, I think there's a huge opportunity to do a financial accountability and fiscal oversight on these, on finding that why have property taxes nearly doubled over the last few years? Mm-hmm. Services haven't, our incomes haven't, and you're squeezing people out of their homes.
Yeah.
It's becoming tough.
Mm-hmm. Especially in my county, we get like no services, so the county is just squeezing us dry. I do argue that like local taxes are the most important. They go towards your most important services, your police, your fire, your parks, stuff like that. But at the same time, a lot of these local governments take advantage. And so, especially at the county, they take so much. We barely get anything. Like in my town, we pay for transportation for people in like big cities, but we don't get that same transportation here. It's like, what are we doing? And especially property taxes that are taxing farms. That's what I don't understand in Michigan too, is the farm exemption is the same exemption as your homestead. So you don't actually get money off for owning a farm.
Well, and this brings up something else if we're going to develop economically. I mean, Michigan, we've seen it over the last 30 years. And maybe it's just a slow bleed where we don't understand how bad the state actually is right now in education, in economic development, in the cost of living, right? I mean, I was talking, just on the cost of living, I was talking to a guy up in Grayling a few months ago, and he was one of the few that moved from Tennessee to Michigan. You don't find too many of these folks, right? Right to work state, no income tax in Tennessee. But he said he was adding up his insurance bills, his electric bills, his local taxes. And he says just for the privilege of living in Michigan, he was paying $5,000 more per year than he was in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That costs a lot of money. And you see that time after time where you've built up this burden and you don't allow folks to actually invest. And Governor Whitmer will go over and spend billions of dollars in corporate welfare for these greenfield developments when you have these empty cities like Flint and Pontiac and Saginaw and Detroit. And don't get upset to me. They're shadows of themselves. They used to be. How do you get it so that you actually allow these urban brownfields to get redeveloped? Instead of having this 1,200 acres of cornfield get gobbled up, how do we get that Romeo Ford truck engine plant, the engine plant, back operating with whatever the new investment is. You already have all that infrastructure around.
See, I think if we just get rid of the state income tax, then that will bring business here automatically.
That would shake up the system.
I mean, seriously, like, because instead of just like handing out millions, billions of dollars that we do all the time for companies to do corrupt things in the end, why, like, especially like all the money that we gave to all the car companies for the battery plants that they didn't make, like, what are we doing? Like, I do not get like stock in the company for my tax dollars going to them. It's just free money to them. I do not see a benefit. So instead, let's just lower taxes for everyone, and it's going to help businesses and individuals.
You look at it, capital follows the path of least resistance, just like electricity does. And how do you make it easier for folks to actually live and do business in Michigan compared to other states? Eliminating the income tax would be a great first start. You look at Tennessee, you look at Texas, look at Florida. Mm-hmm. They have it down where you don't have a tax on what you bring home, and same with small businesses. But you look at a neighboring state like Tennessee. Last 25 years, Tennessee's grown by Indiana, neighboring state like Indiana. Indiana's grown by nearly 1 million people over the last 25 years. Michigan's only grown by a few thousand. We lost population the first decade, grew in the second decade, we're losing again. And I've been to Indiana. Michigan's a much nicer state than Indiana. You look at our lakes, our parks, our trails, right? I mean, just beautiful. I married a Hoosier. I have to go there on occasion. But policies make a difference. Michigan has the highest cost of energy in the Midwest. Indiana is the lowest. Michigan has the highest cost of insurance in the Midwest. Indiana has some of the lowest. They have turnkey regulations. If you want to invest and grow, Michigan, they make it near impossible. Mm-hmm. Who you elect makes a difference, and how they drive in terms of saying, making it more affordable for families so they can make it here, making it easier for job creators and entrepreneurs to invest and grow so they can make it here in Michigan, and most importantly, making sure our kids can actually make it here in Michigan. And that comes back to what you said, the accountability on government. I was talking to a contractor out of mid-Michigan, and they have some facilities in Tennessee. And I go, what's the major differences of doing business in Tennessee and compared to Michigan? And he goes, when you call the government, whether it's the county, whether it's the state, you get somebody to answer, and they try to get you a response. Here, we can't even get somebody on the line in Michigan. That's that accountability that you're talking about. That's the customer service, is that you look at it under Governor Snyder, every department had a matrix, a dashboard, they call them, on what the accountability, turnaround time, customer service, hold time, wait times, all those were eliminated first day under Governor Whitmer. No accountability. And the morale sucks in these state departments.
Yeah, we need to audit our infrastructure. Lansing is a ghost town. Like, how many of these state buildings are actually full?
I think only 1 out of 5 state workers are actually showing up to work right now.
And to be honest with you, I'm not against remote work. What I'm against is like paying for empty buildings. Like, it's either fill them or sell them. We don't need to be
You're in the market?
No, but
okay.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that anytime the government owns property, whether it's local or the state, they don't pay property taxes. So that is empty land that is not bringing in taxes, tax revenue, and everything else. So let me just skip to it. If there was one thing you wish voters knew going into the 2026 election, what would be that one thing?
So farm boy, I'm going to work just as hard as they do every day. And they deserve to have a governor that works just as hard as they do. And unfortunately, we don't have that governor right now. And I'm going to work hard every day to make sure Michigan's more affordable, that our job creators can invest and grow here in the state. And most important, that our kids receive a quality education where they can read, write, and actually earn a living after they finish. So that's why I'm running for governor, and that's what people need to know about me.
Awesome. And where can people find more about you?
NesbittForGovernor.com, or there's only one Aric with an A, Nesbitt. And so it's pretty easy to do your search engine, and you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, X, I don't know what, everything else that you can have out there. But I've hit all 83 counties. I think it's important that you listen to folks from Monroe to Iron Mountain, from Port Huron to Marquette. And what I continue to hear around the state, that it's tough to make a living right now in Michigan. It's tough to support a family right now in Michigan. We need to bring down the cost of government, bring down the cost of energy, bring down the cost of insurance, and make it easier for businesses to create jobs, homegrown businesses, create that economic garden that's been destroyed, and make sure our kids can actually learn here again so they can make it once again here in Michigan.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming out. I think I need to do 2 more Republican candidates, and I need to do, Sheriff Swanson is the only Democrat that will talk to me. None of the others have responded, so they're not willing to talk to an independent like me. So I don't know. I don't know how you win an election without talking to people, but they're going to have fun with that. So
this is why you have to stay out there and continue to grow. And it's something that also President Trump showed is the new media going on these podcasts, and they may not agree with you 100% of the time, but just be honest, just be open, right? Mm-hmm. And have those conversations, and you can learn a little bit. And it's kind of that's the opportunity. So I appreciate having me on. I look forward to having further discussions down the road. Awesome. And appreciate your care for Michigan, your care for families, and understanding that it's okay to challenge the government from time to time.
Yeah, I do that.
Maybe even more than just time to time.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you guys all next time.